An elderly couple asked me to give up my aisle seat so they could sit together. I'd booked it months earlier, so I refused. The man insulted me and wouldn't let it go. When I got up for a bid, I expected him to take my seat, but what he did was much worse. "Excuse me, but you'll need to switch seats with my wife." The man wasn't asking. He was standing in the aisle with his boarding pass dangling from 2 fingers like he was about to hand me a parking ticket, his wife hovering behind him with that particular expression people get when they expect the universe to rearrange itself for their convenience. I looked up from my phone. "Sorry?" "She's in 14F window. I'm in 14D, middle. You're in 14C, aisle." He said this slowly, like I might struggle with the geography. "We'd like to sit together. So you'll take her window seat." The flight attendants were still dealing with boarding chaos 3 rows back. Someone had brought a dog carrier that didn't fit under the seat. Nobody was paying attention to us. "I booked this seat specifically," I said. "Months ago. It's a 6-hour flight." His tone shifted, got that edge people use when they think you're being deliberately difficult. "My wife has a medical condition. She needs me beside her." The wife nodded. She didn't look sick. She looked annoyed that I hadn't already unbuckled my seatbelt. "What condition?" "That's private." "Then I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I need the aisle seat." I turned back to my phone. "Maybe ask a flight attendant to find you adjacent seats somewhere else." He didn't move. I could feel him standing there, radiating indignation. "You know," he said, voice pitched just loud enough for the passengers across the aisle to hear, "I served 32 years in the military so people like you could sit wherever you wanted on an airplane. You're welcome, by the way." I looked up again. "Thank you for your service." I'm still not moving. "Unbelievable." He shook his head, made a show of looking at his wife with theatrical disbelief. "Absolutely unbelievable. The selfishness of young people today." I was 38. Not exactly young. But I didn't correct him. "You could take her window seat," I offered. "Then you'd be together." "I don't want the window. I have prostate issues. I need aisle access." "So does your wife have a medical condition, or do you have a prostate issue?" His face went red. Not embarrassed red. Angry red. The vein in his temple did that thing where it becomes suddenly visible. "Don't you dare speak to me that way." "I haven't said anything disrespectful. I just asked a question." "Harold." The wife tugged his sleeve. "Harold, let's just sit down." "No, Margaret, I will not let this smug little," he caught himself, seemed to remember we were in public, on camera, surrounded by witnesses. He leaned closer, lowered his voice. "You're going to regret this." I didn't respond. I just held his gaze until he finally huffed, shuffled into the middle seat, and jammed himself down with maximum aggression. Margaret took the window without another word. The boarding continued. Overhead bins slammed. The safety demonstration played. Harold sat 6 inches away from me, seething visibly, his elbow creeping over the armrest in small territorial advances. I pulled my elbow back. Gave him the armrest. It wasn't worth the contact. They'd been pushing like this for a while. Not Harold specifically, I'd never seen this particular man before in my life, but people like him. People who treated every plane, every restaurant, every public space like an extension of their living room. People who assumed that asking nicely was just a formality before you gave them what they wanted. I flew twice a month for work. Had done so for almost 8 years. Medical device sales, regional territory covering the Southwest. I knew exactly which seats had the most legroom, which rows were closest to the bathroom without being so close you'd smell it, which airlines actually let you pre-board if you asked correctly. I'd learned to book early, pay extra when necessary, and never apologize for wanting what I paid for. This particular flight was Phoenix to Atlanta, connection to Savannah for a hospital demo. I'd booked the seat in October. It was now February. 4 months of planning, and Harold wanted me to trade for a window seat because he couldn't be bothered to book properly. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines spooled up. Harold muttered something under his breath. I caught the word entitled. I put in my earbuds, started a podcast, and watched the tarmac slide past the window. For the first 2 hours, it was manageable. Harold made a point of sighing loudly whenever I shifted position. Margaret read a paperback romance novel and pretended none of this was happening. I worked on my laptop, answered emails, reviewed the specs for tomorrow's presentation. Then Harold decided he needed to use the bathroom. "Excuse me." I stood, stepped into the aisle, let him pass. He took his time about it, shuffled toward the back with exaggerated slowness. When he returned 5 minutes later, he stopped at my row and just stood there. "I'd like my wife to have the aisle seat now." "That's not how this works. She needs to stretch her legs. Then she can walk to the bathroom. Like everyone else." "You are genuinely the most selfish person I have ever encountered on an aircraft." A flight attendant appeared at my shoulder. Young woman, ponytail, the particular exhaustion that comes from dealing with the public at 30,000 feet. Is everything okay here? This man won't let my wife sit comfortably, Harold said, instantly transforming into a wounded grandfather. We asked politely if he'd switch seats and he refused. Now he won't even let her have aisle access. The flight attendant looked at me. I'm in my assigned seat, I said. He's welcome to sit in his assigned seat whenever he's ready. Sir? She turned to Harold. I'm going to need you to take your seat. We're about to hit some turbulence and the captain's turning on the seatbelt sign. Harold's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Margaret, who was studiously not looking at anyone, then back at the flight attendant. Fine, he said. He pushed past me with unnecessary force, shoulder-checking me as he went. I sat back down without comment. The seatbelt sign chimed on. The plane shuddered. Harold gripped his armrests. For the next hour, I noticed him watching me. Not constantly, he'd look away whenever I turned my head, but I could feel it. That focused attention of someone who's decided you're their enemy. Someone who's running scenarios in their head. Around hour 4, I needed to use the bathroom myself. I'd been holding it, not wanting to give Harold another opportunity to make a scene, but biology eventually wins. I stood up. Harold immediately pressed himself back against his seat, making a production of not touching me as I passed. Don't take too long, he said. Unlike some people, we don't have all day. I didn't respond. The bathroom line was short, just one person ahead of me. I waited, did what I needed to do, washed my hands, and headed back to my seat. Harold wasn't in it. That was my first thought. My second thought was that Margaret wasn't in her seat either. My third thought was, where's my laptop bag? I'd stowed it under the seat in front of me. Standard practice. It had my laptop, my presentation materials, my backup hard drive, and about 3 months of work that I hadn't fully uploaded to the cloud yet because I'd been meaning to get around to it. The bag was gone. I checked the overhead bin, empty. I checked under Harold's seat, under Margaret's seat. Nothing. A flight attendant, different one this time, older man with a neat mustache, noticed me searching. Can I help you find something? My laptop bag. It was under my seat. It's gone. Are you sure you didn't? I'm sure. He frowned, looked around. Maybe it got moved during boarding? Sometimes things shift. It didn't shift. It was taken. I looked toward the bathrooms. Harold was walking back up the aisle, hands in his pockets, expression carefully neutral. Margaret was right behind him. Him, I said. That man. He took my bag. The flight attendant's expression shifted, became more guarded. Sir, that's a serious accusation. Check his carry-on. I can't just. My laptop is in that bag. There's work on it I can't replace. Check his carry-on. Harold reached us, stopped, looked between me and the flight attendant with practiced innocence. What's going on? This gentleman says his bag is missing. Missing? Harold shook his head slowly. That's terrible. Maybe he left it in the bathroom. I didn't take it to the bathroom. Well, I don't know what to tell you. He slid past me, back into his seat. Margaret followed. Some people just can't keep track of their belongings. The flight attendant touched my arm. Sir, let's not make this confrontational. I'll ask the crew to do a sweep, check if anything was moved. I want to see his carry-on. I can't search another passenger's belongings without cause. If you want to file a report when we land. My laptop has a GPS tracker. Everyone went quiet. Harold's head turned, just slightly. It's a company device, I continued. They all have tracking software. I can pull up the location right now. You're bluffing, Harold said. You don't have any tracker. Then you won't mind me checking. I pulled out my phone, opened the Find My app. The company hadn't actually installed trackers on our laptops, budget cuts, they said, but I'd bought my own tile device and stuck it inside the bag's lining after a close call at a coffee shop in Albuquerque 3 years ago. The app loaded. The little dot pulsed. 15 feet away. Directly above Harold's seat. I turned the screen toward the flight attendant. He looked at it, looked at Harold, and his entire demeanor changed. Sir, he said to Harold, I'm going to need you to open your overhead bin. This is harassment. I'm a veteran. I served 32 years. Open the bin, please. Harold's jaw tightened. Margaret stared straight ahead, gripping her paperback like a lifeline. He didn't move. If you don't open the bin voluntarily, the flight attendant said, voice calm but firm, I'm going to involve the air marshal. We have one on this flight. I hadn't known that. Apparently Harold hadn't either. He stood up slowly, reached for the overhead bin, and pulled it open. My laptop bag was sitting on top of his jacket. Not hidden. Not even pushed to the back. Just sitting there, like he'd expected to deny everything and figured no one would challenge him. The flight attendant reached up, pulled the bag down, handed it to me. Is this your property? I unzipped it. Laptop, still there. Hard drive, still there. Presentation folder, still there. He hadn't taken anything out, he'd just taken the whole thing, planning to walk off the plane with it, probably figuring I wouldn't notice until he was already in a cab. Yes. This is mine. The flight attendant nodded, then turned to Harold with an expression that had gone completely professional. Sir, you're going to need to come with me to the galley. I didn't steal anything. I moved it because he's been bothering us all flight. I was going to give it back. To the galley, now. Harold looked at Margaret. She wouldn't meet his eyes. He stood up, muttered something about lawyers and discrimination and how he'd fought for this country, and followed the flight attendant toward the back of the plane. I sat down in my aisle seat. Margaret still wouldn't look at me. Her hands were shaking slightly, turning pages she clearly wasn't reading. Did you know? I asked. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said he was just going to teach you a lesson. By stealing my work? He wasn't going to keep it. He was going to hide it in the bathroom. Make you panic. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with the flight. He does things like this. When he feels disrespected. That's theft. I know. She went back to her book. I went back to my laptop. 20 minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing our descent into Atlanta. Normal landing information, weather, connecting gates. Then a pause. We'd also like to advise passengers that due to an incident on board, there will be a brief delay at the gate while law enforcement boards to address a matter. We apologize for any inconvenience. Margaret's hands stopped moving on her book. The plane landed without incident. Taxied to the gate, stopped. Nobody moved. The door opened, and two uniformed officers stepped into the cabin. They walked directly to the back of the plane, where Harold had been held in the galley for the past 40 minutes. I heard raised voices, his, mostly, and then silence. They walked him back up the aisle in handcuffs. He stopped at my row. The officers tried to keep him moving, but he planted his feet, looked directly at me with more hatred than I'd ever seen directed my way by a complete stranger. You ruined our trip, he said. We were going to see our grandchildren. You ruined it because of a seat. You stole my laptop. It was a joke. A lesson. You could have just moved and none of this. The officers pulled him forward. He stumbled, caught himself, and then he was gone, out the door, into the jetway. Margaret stood up slowly, gathered her things, and walked past me without a word. The passengers around me were quiet. A few gave me sympathetic looks. One woman across the aisle mouthed, "Good for you." Most people just wanted to get off the plane and pretend they hadn't witnessed any of it. I waited until the crowd thinned, then grabbed my bags and headed for my connecting gate. The Savannah flight was in 2 hours. I had time to find food, charge my phone, and process what had just happened. But I didn't feel like processing. I didn't feel like dwelling on Harold's face or Margaret's tired eyes or the way he'd said 32 years like it was a magic password that should unlock compliance from everyone around him. I felt fine, actually, clear. Like something that had been building pressure for a long time had finally vented. I found a quiet spot near my gate, opened my laptop, and started reviewing tomorrow's presentation. 3 days later, I got a call from an Atlanta detective. Mr. Reeves? This is Detective Carla Morrison, Atlanta PD. I'm following up on the incident from Delta Flight 1847, February 14th. The laptop theft. Yes, sir. I wanted to inform you that Mr. Harold Whitmore has been formally charged with theft and interference with flight crew members. The federal charge carries significant penalties. The FAA takes these things seriously. I didn't realize it would go federal. When it happens on an aircraft, it automatically does. The airline is also pursuing civil action for the flight delay and the cost of the law enforcement response. And since he was technically under detention when the plane landed, that added a layer. I leaned back in my hotel chair. Outside, Savannah's historic district was doing its thing. Oak trees, horse carriages, tourists with cameras. What kind of penalties are we talking about? For interference with crew members alone? Up to 20 years, though that's the maximum and rarely applied. More likely he's looking at significant fines, possible prison time of 1 to 5 years depending on how the federal prosecutor wants to play it. The theft charge is separate and might be handled at the state level. His wife said they were going to see their grandchildren. They were, yes. The family was apparently expecting them in Savannah. A pause. I'm not sure that's going to happen now, Mr. Reeves. At least not for a while. He did this to himself. He did. I'm just calling to let you know where things stand. You may be contacted for a deposition or asked to provide a formal statement. The tile tracker data was helpful. The airline was able to pull the exact timestamp of when the bag was moved versus when you left your seat. Will I need to testify? Possibly. Depends on whether he takes a plea deal. His attorney's already making noise about his military service, his age, lack of prior criminal history. The usual. He told me I was selfish for not giving up my seat. People tell themselves all sorts of things, Mr. Reeves. They don't usually end up in federal custody over it. I thanked her for the update, hung up, and went back to my work. The hospital demo went well. Signed a contract for 3 units, which meant a solid commission and a good quarter. I flew home to Phoenix on Saturday, window seat this time. I'd actually wanted to sleep, and didn't think about Harold Whitmore at all. That changed 2 weeks later. I was at my desk, processing orders, when my personal email pinged with a message from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: regarding your actions on Flight 1847. I opened it against my better judgment. Mr. Reeves. You don't know me, but I know exactly who you are and what you did to my grandfather. Harold Whitmore is a decorated veteran who served this country with honor for over 3 decades. He made a small mistake on an airplane, a joke, a harmless prank, and because of your pettiness and vindictiveness, he is now facing federal charges that could put him in prison. My grandmother Margaret is devastated. She had to fly home alone. She's 74 years old and has a heart condition. Do you understand what you've done to this family? We are demanding that you drop all charges immediately. Contact the prosecutor's office and tell them you don't want to pursue this. If you refuse, we will make your life very difficult. We have lawyers. We have connections. We will find out where you work and make sure your employer knows what kind of person they have representing their company. This is your only warning. Daniel Whitmore. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Detective Morrison with a single line. Is this something I should be concerned about? She called me an hour later. Mr. Reeves, I forwarded the email to the prosecutor's office. This could potentially be witness intimidation, depending on how they want to interpret it. Should I be worried? The email came from a residential IP address in suburban Atlanta. Daniel Whitmore is Harold's grandson, age 34, works as a financial advisor. No criminal record, no history of violence. My professional opinion? He's upset and venting. Doesn't understand how federal charges work and thinks you have some kind of switch you can flip. Can't victims request that charges be dropped? They can request. Prosecutors aren't obligated to honor those requests, especially in federal cases with multiple charges. The FAA violation isn't about you personally, it's about aircraft security. The airline is involved. The flight crew filed their own statements. Even if you wanted to drop everything, the machine is already moving. I don't want to drop anything. I didn't think you did. Just wanted you to know where things stand. A pause. That said, if you receive any further communications from the Whitmore family, don't respond. Forward them to me directly. If this escalates to actual threats or any form of contact beyond email, we'll need to document it. Understood. I hung up and went back to work. The email sat in my inbox, unanswered, a small grenade that hadn't quite gone off. The next one came a week later. Different address, same sender. Mr. Reeves. I notice you didn't respond to my previous message. I'm going to assume you're simply thinking it over, so I'm giving you one more chance to do the right thing. My grandfather is 76 years old. He has served this country. He does not deserve to spend his final years in prison because of a misunderstanding. I've done some research on you. I know where you work. I know who your clients are. I know you represent a medical device company that relies heavily on its reputation in the healthcare industry. What do you think happens when those hospitals find out their sales representative got an elderly veteran arrested for a practical joke? Do you think they'll want to continue doing business with someone like that? This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. Actions have consequences. You chose to ruin my grandfather's life. Now you can choose to fix it, or you can live with what happens next. Daniel. I forwarded this one to Detective Morrison without reading it twice. Her response came by text, forwarded to prosecutor. They're reviewing. 2 days later, I got a call from the FBI. Mr. Reeves? Special Agent Michael Torres, Atlanta Field Office. We've been assigned to investigate potential witness intimidation in connection with the Harold Whitmore case. I understand you've received some communications from his family? 2 emails. I forwarded them both to Detective Morrison. Yes, we have those. We'd like to ask you a few questions, get a formal statement. Would you be available for a phone interview tomorrow afternoon? Sure. The interview lasted 40 minutes. I walked them through everything: the original flight, the seat request, Harold's behavior, the theft, the arrest, the emails. Agent Torres was professional, thorough, and gave nothing away about what he was thinking. At the end, he said, Mr. Reeves, I have to be straight with you. The grandson's emails are borderline. They're aggressive and they contain implied threats to your employment, which could be construed as attempting to influence your cooperation with a federal investigation. Whether the U.S. attorney decides to charge him separately is their call, not mine. What do you recommend I do? Keep forwarding any communications you receive. Don't engage. If anything escalates to direct contact, someone showing up at your home or workplace, call 911 first, then call me. I thanked him and hung up. For the next month, nothing happened. No emails, no calls, no strangers appearing at my office. I started to think Daniel Whitmore had come to his senses, gotten some actual legal advice, and realized that threatening federal witnesses wasn't the way to help his grandfather. Then I got a call from my company's HR director. James, do you have a few minutes? There's something we need to discuss. I walked into her office with the particular dread that comes from being summoned by HR without warning. Linda Chen was in her 50s, had been with the company for 15 years, and had the kind of neutral expression that made it impossible to guess whether you were about to be promoted or fired. Close the door, please. I closed it. James, we received an unusual communication this week. Actually, several of them. All from the same person. She slid a printed stack across her desk, emails. A lot of them. Someone named Daniel Whitmore has been contacting our customer relations department, our main office line, and 3 of our hospital accounts directly. He's claiming that you had his elderly grandfather arrested under false pretenses and are refusing to drop charges. He's suggesting that hospitals should reconsider their relationship with a company that employs someone of, quote, dubious moral character, unquote. I looked at the stack. At least a dozen printouts. He's also claiming that you provoked his grandfather into a confrontation because you refused to accommodate a disabled veteran. His grandfather tried to steal my laptop. I know. I looked up the incident after the first email came in. Linda's expression remained neutral, but her voice softened slightly. James, I want to be clear about something. This company does not respond to this kind of pressure. We're not going to discipline you, reprimand you, or take any action based on these communications. Okay, but... She leaned forward. I also want you to know that this person is persistent. He's found the names of hospital administrators we work with. He's trying to damage your professional relationships. Some of these emails went directly to procurement officers at accounts you've been nurturing for years. I felt something cold settle into my chest. What did they say? The hospitals? Most of them didn't respond. 2 forwarded the emails to us asking what was going on. I told them it was a personal matter involving a federal case and that you'd done nothing wrong. Did they believe you? I think so. But James, she paused. This is becoming a problem that might require a more formal response. Have you considered pursuing a restraining order? I've been reporting everything to the FBI. They're investigating. Good. Keep doing that. But I also think you might want to consult with a private attorney about civil remedies. What this person is doing, contacting your clients, attempting to damage your business relationships, that's tortious interference. It could form the basis of a lawsuit. I nodded slowly. I hadn't thought about suing anyone. The whole situation still felt surreal, like a minor airline dispute that had somehow spiraled into a federal case and a harassment campaign. I'll look into it, I said. Do that. And James? Linda's expression finally shifted, showing something that might have been sympathy. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Someone steals from you, you report it. That's how civilization works. You don't owe this family anything. I thanked her and went back to my desk. That night, I called my cousin David, who practiced civil litigation in San Diego. You've got a solid case for tortious interference, he said after I'd explained everything. He's deliberately contacting your business associates with false or misleading information intended to damage your professional relationships. That's textbook. What would happen if I sued him? Best case? He gets a judgment against him, has to pay damages, and is ordered to cease all contact with you and your business associates. Worst case? He's got no assets, declares bankruptcy, and you spend 20 grand on legal fees recovering nothing. What about a restraining order? That's easier. You've got documented harassment, escalating contact, implied threats. Any judge would grant it. Would it actually stop him? Depends on whether he's rational or crazy. David paused. From what you're describing, I'd say he's somewhere in between. Rational enough to know what he's doing, crazy enough to keep doing it despite the consequences. Those are the dangerous ones. What would you do? Me? I'd do both. File for the restraining order immediately. That creates a paper trail and gives law enforcement teeth if he violates it. Then I'd send a demand letter for the tortious interference, laying out exactly what he's done and what damages you've suffered. Sometimes that's enough to scare people straight. And if it's not? Then you sue him, take it to trial, and let a jury decide how much his grandfather's practical joke is worth. I filed for the restraining order the following week. A judge in Atlanta granted a temporary order within 3 days, citing the documented pattern of harassment and the ongoing federal investigation. Daniel Whitmore was served at his financial advisory office in front of his colleagues. I know this because Detective Morrison told me. She seemed almost pleased. His face when they handed him the papers, she said. Apparently he thought he was untouchable. The demand letter went out the same week. My attorney laid out everything: the emails, the contacts to my employer, the contacts to hospital clients, the implied threats, the interference with federal proceedings. He demanded $150,000 in damages and a signed agreement to cease all contact. Daniel Whitmore's response came through his own attorney. A single page, dismissive in tone. Our client denies any wrongdoing. The emails in question were constitutionally protected speech expressing legitimate concerns about Mr. Reeves' conduct. Our client will not be paying any damages, signing any agreements, or engaging further with this frivolous demand. He's calling your bluff, David said when I forwarded it to him. He thinks you won't actually follow through. Will I? Do you want to? I thought about Harold Whitmore's face when they walked him off the plane in handcuffs. I thought about Margaret's tired eyes, the way she'd said he does things like this when he feels disrespected. I thought about the stack of emails on Linda's desk, each one a little bomb lobbed into relationships I'd spent years building. Yes, I said. File the lawsuit. We filed in federal court, diversity jurisdiction, since Daniel lived in Georgia and I lived in Arizona. The complaint named him personally and laid out everything: the harassment campaign, the tortious interference, the violation of the restraining order. He'd sent one more email after being served, claiming he'd never received the papers, and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. We asked for $300,000. 2 weeks after the filing, I got a call from Agent Torres. Mr. Reeves, I wanted to let you know that the U.S. Attorney has decided to add charges against Daniel Whitmore. Witness tampering and obstruction of justice. He's being arrested tomorrow morning. I sat down slowly. Both of them? The grandfather and the grandson? Different charges, different cases. But yes, the Whitmore family is having a bad year. Because of a seat on an airplane. Because a man on an airplane decided that stealing someone's property was an appropriate response to not getting what he wanted. And then his grandson decided that threatening the victim was an appropriate response to legal consequences. Torres paused. These things escalate, Mr. Reeves. They always escalate. The difference is, you documented everything. You didn't engage. You let the system work. Most people don't have that discipline. I just forwarded emails. That's exactly my point. Daniel Whitmore was arrested at 6 a.m. the following morning. Federal marshals, apparently. His wife answered the door in her bathrobe and watched them put her husband in handcuffs. I know this because it made the local news in Atlanta. Retired veteran's grandson arrested in harassment case, that was the headline. The article mentioned the original incident, Harold's pending charges, and the escalating campaign of intimidation that had led to Daniel's arrest. The comments section was predictable. Half the people thought I was a hero for standing my ground. The other half thought I was a monster for ruining two men's lives over a seat. I didn't read the comments for long. Harold Whitmore's trial was scheduled for June. Daniel's for August. My civil case against Daniel was put on hold pending the criminal proceedings. In April, Harold's attorney reached out with a plea offer. Harold would plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge of petty theft, pay a $5,000 fine, and serve 2 years of probation. In exchange, the federal interference charge would be dropped, and Harold would avoid prison. The prosecutor called me to discuss it. "We don't need your approval to accept the plea," she said. "But given your involvement, I wanted your thoughts. What happens if you don't accept it?" "We'd go to trial. Given his age and lack of prior record, he'd probably get a suspended sentence even if convicted on everything. The jury would see a confused old man who made a mistake. Sympathy would run high. And his grandson? Separate case. Daniel's charges are solid. The emails alone are damning, and the continued contact after the restraining order shows consciousness of guilt. We're not offering him a plea deal." "Why not?" "Because he's not a confused old man. He's a 34-year-old professional who made deliberate choices over several months. He doesn't get to hide behind his grandfather's service record." I thought about it for a moment. Harold, shuffling onto that plane with his boarding pass, expecting the world to make room. Margaret, gripping her paperback, knowing what he was going to do before he did it. Daniel, sitting at his computer in suburban Atlanta, typing threats he thought would never come back to him. "Accept Harold's plea," I said. "He's not the one I'm angry at." Noted. Harold Whitmore pleaded guilty in May. I didn't attend the hearing. According to Detective Morrison, who sent me a brief update, he looked smaller than she remembered, diminished. Margaret was there, sitting in the gallery, not looking at anyone. Daniel's trial was a different story. I flew to Atlanta to testify. My attorney came with me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, federal trials usually are, and Daniel's family filled the gallery behind him. His wife, his mother, an older woman I assumed was Margaret, Several people I didn't recognize. Harold wasn't there. The terms of his probation didn't allow him to attend legal proceedings related to his own case, and the judge had determined that Daniel's charges were sufficiently connected. I testified for 2 hours. The prosecution walked me through every email, every contact with my employer, every hospital administrator Daniel had reached out to. I explained the impact on my work, my stress, my sleepless nights. I was calm, measured. I didn't raise my voice or show anger. Daniel's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive. Asked if I could have simply moved seats. Asked if I had to report the laptop theft. Asked if I understood that I'd destroyed a family over a practical joke. I didn't destroy anything, I said. Your client made choices, repeatedly. Over months. He could have stopped at any time. But you didn't give him a chance to. I gave him every chance. I never responded to his emails. I never contacted him. I simply documented what he was doing and reported it to law enforcement. So you admit you reported him to law enforcement? Yes. That's what you do when someone harasses you. The jury was out for 4 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Daniel was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay restitution, $25,000 to me personally, $15,000 to my employer for the cost of dealing with his harassment campaign, and $10,000 in court costs. My civil case was settled the same week. His family paid $75,000 rather than face a trial with a convicted harasser as the defendant. My attorney took his cut, and I netted just over $50,000. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired, mostly. Tired of courtrooms and depositions and explaining, over and over, that I hadn't done anything wrong. 6 months later, I was on another flight. LAX to Denver this time, for a conference. Aisle seat, naturally. I'd booked it 2 months in advance. A woman approached my row during boarding. 70s, well-dressed, traveling alone. She looked at her boarding pass, looked at the middle seat next to me, and sighed. "Excuse me," she said. "I don't suppose you'd consider switching. I have a window seat 3 rows back, and I really do better on the aisle." I looked at her. She looked back, polite but not demanding. No husband hovering behind her. No entitlement in her voice. Just a simple request. "Sorry," I said. "I need the aisle seat too." "Of course." She smiled, settled into the middle seat, and that was the end of it. The flight was uneventful. We didn't speak again. When we landed, I pulled my bag from the overhead bin and headed for the exit. The woman was right behind me. "Thank you for being pleasant about it," she said as we walked up the jetway. "The last time I asked someone to switch, he lectured me for 10 minutes about seat selection etiquette. People are strange about airplanes. They really are." We parted ways in the terminal. I never saw her again. But I thought about her sometimes. About the difference between asking and demanding. About expecting and accepting. About how easy it would have been for Harold Whitmore to just sit in his assigned seat and read a magazine and let the flight pass without incident. He'd made a choice. His grandson had made choices. And I'd made mine. That's what it came down to, in the end. Not seats or laptops or veteran status or respect. Just choices, and consequences, and the willingness to see them through. I don't fly as much anymore. The company restructured, and my territory is smaller now. When I do fly, I still book aisle seats, still pay extra when I have to, still refuse to apologize for wanting what I've paid for. Nobody's asked me to switch in over a year. But if they do, I already know the answer.